recording. Hi, this is Dorothy Kuhn, and with me is the wonderful Nicole Hercus. Do I pronounce your name correctly, Nicole?
Correct. Thank you, Dorothy.
Wonderful, wonderful. And she is here from Australia. It is wonderful to have her here. And as you know, on the 13-Second Rule podcast, we are all about women being successful in a brief moment and with your career and through time so that you can be fully you and authentically you while doing the great work that you are here to do in the world. So a little bit about Nicole. She is an executive at Executive Central in Australia, and they are consultants in leadership development, and they have specific programs in women's leadership development. So Nicole, tell us a little bit more about you and what drew you to this wonderful kind of work.
No, thanks, Dorothy. Look, I have always been very passionate about people, and I absolutely wholeheartedly believe that every one of us is here, with a special gift and an opportunity to make a difference. I always wanted to do work that felt meaningful to me, and through that focus on people, I really love working with my clients to help them find their unique point of difference and to empower them to make positive change in the environments that they're in. And this is really the focus of Executive Central too. We really focus on leadership development, and we use lots of tools and methodologies, but really we're about making everyone the best they can be at work.
That is great. And we know that work life is fueled by the kind of home life that we have, and some of the issues that we run into at work show up in a little different way socially, and in yet another way in our family situations. So, and I'm so glad that you've got this very, very much a focus on work, because you're just the exact kind of person who can really pull back the curtain for our listeners and our viewers on what it is that hiring managers are really looking for, so that women who want to move ahead can move ahead and know when to make that move so that they're not waiting too long.
Absolutely.
So tell me, what are if you were to pick just like 2 or 3 things that are super important for women to kind of develop in their day-to-day working, and as we were talking before we turned on the recording, getting up and through mid-management and into those executive ranks is really the path that so often is kind of difficult for women to get through. It tends to be very male-dominated, and the companies cannot benefit from what women bring to the table if they're not in decision-making positions. So what do you recommend?
Well, Dorothy, I think it's a great question. And I think if I zoom out a little bit for a moment and look at the environments that we're working in now, the world is a complex place.
Yes.
It's increasingly complex, and the pace of change, certainly in organisations, is ever increasing.
True.
And so the first and probably the most fundamental skill that I think that people need to bring to work is a mindset of flexibility and adaptability. We have to be prepared to grow and learn all the time, because things are changing really frequently. And that takes a fair bit of courage to bring that mindset, particularly if we have come from a paradigm that has really placed a lot of emphasis on knowing and being subject matter experts in our particular field.
Right.
Now, that's valuable, but I still think we have to bring this really flexible, adaptable, open mind so that we can stay agile and flexible in the world of work today. I think that's probably the primary and most essential quality for being successful in today's work environment.
When I was in my career in big, like Fortune 50 companies here in the U.S., I saw that in spades. The executives would, and people who were just below the executive level, those directors and such, women and men both, they would be in a position, a leadership position, over a particular part of, say, a Fortune 50 company, and they'd be there for 9 months, maybe 12, and then they would move on. It would be a lateral move to another area, because in order to be considered to go from mid-management, upper mid-management into the executive ranks, you have to know enough about the whole organization and how to tune things so that a whole variety of areas of the organization are something that you're comfortable in.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And that is flexibility and adaptability, like in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
And building at that, taking your skills from your current level, up to that next level where the decisions, the simpler decisions have already been made at the lower level, and only the really hard decisions get filtered up to you. And that continues and continues and continues. So you got to build another decision-making strategy as you move up. And that really is flexibility and adaptability.
Yeah, absolutely. And great problem-solving skills.
Yes, very much so. So what else? I bet you mentioned 3 things.
I did. So I think the next one, and I think we're going to see even more of this as we increasingly integrate, robotics and artificial intelligence and big data into the workplace, is the space that remains ultimately human and where we need to be strongest is actually in terms of our relationship management and our soft skills.
Yes.
So people who are good influencers, they build strong relationships quickly, they can develop trust, they can, listen and seek multiple perspectives.
Yes.
All of those really strong soft skills are absolutely essential, I think.
Yes. And women are great at those soft skills. We're good listeners, and we know how to work with a whole variety of different kinds of people, and it's easier for us in a certain way, and it's something that I think has been underappreciated, but that is being more and more appreciated for the very reasons you mentioned.
Absolutely. And, Dorothy, I would add to that by saying one of the things that I observe in women that I work with now is we underestimate the value of networking in that relationship building space. We can occasionally tend to focus on getting the work done versus the real value of taking the time to build relationships and build a network. And I think that's a really key criteria for success.
I agree. And, men are really good about doing this. They use the vehicle of sports to do it. So they'll watch, here in the U.S., they'll watch football, in season on Sunday afternoon. Well, they get to work early so that they can, all, talk about the game with the boss. That is relationship building time. And the sport is just the vehicle. So when we don't do that, then we're missing out. So if you want to move up, you got to know, what your boss has fun with and be able to connect on that level. And anybody can, develop, some level of awareness and expertise on a sport. It's not like the rules are that complicated,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's incredible how those little things make a big difference in being able to see how you can hold your own and, with a lot of voices going in the room. And that's a critical skill for executive leadership.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. So what else? What's your number 3?
My number 3 is what I describe as a can-do attitude.
Yes.
And I think if I go back to the first point that I made, or the first point I made about the complexity of work and the pace of work these days, I like to think of it a little bit like it's a little bit like a river.
Uh-huh.
And and business and is a bit like a river, and as you go down the river you'll encounter rocks in the river or boulders in the river.
Uh-huh.
And your job is to, just like that water, is to go around the boulders and keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to do that successfully, you've really got to bring a solution focus and a can-do attitude.
Right.
So instead of just seeing problems, and
Uh-huh.
this is something that, some people can be incredibly skilled at identifying challenges, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not enough. You've got to be able to identify a solution and
Mm-hmm.
really bring an attitude,
Mm-hmm.
a real can-do attitude. And that attitude makes all the difference.
Oh, it does. It does. So I'll tell you a little story, and I bet you've got a story like this to kind of illustrate. But when I was working for a Fortune 50 financial institution and managing a big technology base, and we were moving. It was a weekend where we were moving a lot of code to the production environment, and one of the directors that we had was new on the job. We'd been developing and testing this code base for months, and he had been there for about 6 weeks. So the majority of the decisions had been made before he was even on the team. So he was quite anxious. We had a call a couple days before we were moving that code base to production, and I could just hear it in his voice that he was really a bit worried. And so I had to reassure him and that he would be okay, because of course he hadn't been able to pull any of the early levers that make all the difference. Who wouldn't be a little uncomfortable in that situation? So I said, I just told him, we are going to find some problems that we didn't find in test. And we will block and tackle those problems until they submit.
I love it.
And he laughed just like you did. And it just dissipated all of
Yeah.
He knew that he could trust that I would lead the team to do what needed to be done, and the code would be fine.
Yeah. Oh, that is such a great story. Block and tackle. I'll remember that one.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
That's an American football kind of expression. And, you might have a story that illustrates another aspect of how that can-do attitude can really show up.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, I've got lots of those kinds of stories. I think one of the ones that I'm encountering at the moment, I'm working with the CEO of a business that is a technology business also.
Mm-hmm.
And they're at a really critical time in their development, and they've got some very serious goals that they have to achieve, and they've got a limited amount of time in which they can achieve those before they will have to start, thinking about alternative scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, maybe a bit like your story. This is a really, this is a time of vulnerability for that CEO, if you like, because of course, he knows what has to be achieved. He knows he has to bring an entire team of people along for the ride.
Right.
He knows that it's going to be a stretch task. And of course, he can hope and wish all he likes that they're going to get across the line. But, there's a degree of uncertainty about that.
Uh-huh.
And the only thing that we can do, because we know what the strategy is moving forward, is actually just get behind him with that exact level of support.
Yes.
And that confidence, bringing that to the table, that confidence and that level of support it's quite extraordinary what it can do.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that kind of attitude, and maybe it's team spirit that comes underneath that, is just, it's so powerful and not to be underestimated. The impact that you can have when you play like that.
It is, and play like that is that play metaphor is so super important. And here's the I'm a scientist by training. I went into management because I wasn't the superest geek around. And I wasn't willing to stay in the analysis pool for a career. That would just bore me to tears. I like a lot of change. But one of the things that I've noticed is that when people have that can-do attitude, that they can have more fun with it. And having fun is critical to being successful, in learning and doing good business. And the biological reason, I hadn't studied biology. For me, it was physics and math, really geeky. But I read those neurologists, they're doing so much great work these days. And it turns out those stress hormones, they limit your ability for creativity. They limit your ability for problem solving. They limit your ability to see a future that you really want, because they tend to make you too focused on the problem. So having fun with what you're doing and with your teammates at work is absolutely critical to not just a life well lived, but to getting the stuff done that is in front of you that's hard to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's what a relief to discover that, because don't we all want to have more fun at work?
Oh, it makes work so much better. And it's why game metaphors are just so critically important. Whatever games or sports you like to play, those metaphors are really important in the workplace.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful. So those exceptional people skills, I came to a place where I realized that I'm kind of going backward in your list of three. I love these topics, but I came to a place where, from my geeky, beginnings as a scientist and trying to move up, I realized that I did not have the kind of people skills that I really needed. I was friendly and outgoing, but that doesn't mean that I was a really great listener. It didn't mean that that I was open to and confident in being able to find a solution no matter what happened. And that I thought at that early point in my career in management that I had to figure it all out. I didn't know how to rely on my team and leverage all of the talent therein. So what do you recommend when people are making that, that kind of a journey so that they can develop those really good people skills for our listeners who that's still before them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess, Dorothy, if we look at what the definition of leadership is, the way that I understand it is it's achieving results through others.
Yes.
So the real focus, once you move into that role, is actually it's your capacity to develop others to be able to deliver results. So there's a big transition moving from being a high achieving, individual, sort of deliverer, to moving into a space where suddenly actually the focus is about how you build and develop other people.
Right.
And one of the things that I find really helpful for people, because people need some really practical strategies about how to actually do that.
Yeah.
And I find it can be really helpful to get them very curious about identifying other people's strengths.
Yes.
So watch your people and notice, when do they really hit it out of the ballpark?
Yes.
When are they at their best? When are they really in flow?
Yes.
When are they most energized and engaged? And see if you can really understand what brings them to life. And then once you've got that perspective on your team, you've got a much stronger sense about how you build a team around individual strengths.
Mm-hmm. So true, so true. And one of the things that our listeners may be aware of is that concept of flow, where things are just moving like seamlessly around you, and that you are in that state of knowingness that everything is going to be okay, and that you're in the zone, so to speak, with your team and with yourself and with the work that needs to be done. But I will put a link in the show notes for that, and if you've got one, I'm happy to include that as well. But it's an exceptional and a very high productivity kind of state to be in.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And if we link it back to what you talked about in terms of play and fun at work, when we're using our strengths, we're generally having a lot more fun, which means we're in that flow.
Right, right.
Mm.
And it makes it easier for us to fortify the parts of us that aren't as strong
Yes.
when we're in that state as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because we can make a game out of
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, and we can set aside. Before I turned on the recording, we were talking about giving up that idea of perfection, and how
Yeah.
as women we can have been tricked by. I say tricked, kind of in a very loose term, but there's everything in our culture, at least here in the U.S., is wanting us to be perfect, the perfect body shape, the perfect makeup, the perfect hair, the perfect outfit, all that kind of stuff. Oh, just give. I grew up Catholic, and so I say, I have this habit of giving things up for Lent, and I figure I can have Lent anytime I want.
Excellent. I'm going to take a leaf out of your book.
Oh, do it, do it. And for me, the things that I want to give up aren't things that I like. They're things
Yeah.
that no longer serve me.
Serve you.
They
Yeah.
don't work for me anymore.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
just to give that away, and it helped me to step into being a better version of Dorothy.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Mm.
so listeners, dearest ones, you have full permission to give up perfect.
Yeah.
It is a game no one can win, and no one is ever happy at.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Mm.
wonderful. So do you have a story you want to tell about that?
About giving up perfection.
Yeah.
Let me think. Well, one of the things that I feel very strongly about in terms of progressing
Mm-hmm.
in 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 your career, and I think this is a really important one for women too, is that actually what makes you successful the more you ascend is not necessarily what you do more of, but it's what you give up. So I think that we have a real tendency when we progress and we move into a new role,
Mm-hmm.
we have a tendency to keep doing the stuff we always did and then try to do the new job on top of that.
Oh, good point. Really good point.
And we burn out really quickly.
Yeah.
And you and I spoke in before we turned the recording on too about what we're seeing for women in the workplace really frequently now is high levels of burnout, exhaustion, feeling torn from pillar to post. And I think a lot of that is, to your point, is because we're failing to let go of things.
Yeah.
And the way I like to frame that for people is sometimes, listen, if you're still doing that, but there's somebody else in your team who is also able to do it, well, you're robbing them of a development opportunity.
Exactly.
So empower other people to take that stuff off your plate, because you really only should be doing the things that only you are able to do.
Right, right. Given your talents and your strengths and the fit for the position that you are now in. And one of the things also I like to encourage women about is sometimes we can in that kind of related to that perfection thing is we can want to play safe
Yeah.
a little bit. And you look at Serena Williams. Is she a world champion because she is hitting the ball into the center of the court?
Yeah.
No. She is hitting the ball to the sidelines, like this far inside the foul line, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you got to shoot the ball for the foul line, and do your best to bring it in. And the more comfortable that we as women get with risk, the more profound the kind of results we can get, and the easier it is that we make it on ourselves.
Absolutely. Dorothy, I wholeheartedly agree. And, to that end, the one thing I feel most passionately about for women in the world of work today, the one quality we need to cultivate more of is courage.
Yes. Yes. And if you're worried about safety, courage can't happen in that space.
Absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And inherent in the in the notion of what courage is, and it goes back to a French word, "coeur," which is heart.
Right.
Is the notion of being more of yourself.
Yes.
And inherent in that you're being courageous
Uh-huh.
if you're a little scared,
Yes.
and that is a good thing.
It is
So
a good thing.
it means you're learning, it means you're growing,
Mm-hmm.
it means you're taking risks, it means you're expanding, and that's where we need to play, I think.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes, definitely, definitely. I will. I bet you've got some stories related to when you have seen women show up in with courage. If
Yeah,
you want to tell one now, I would love to hear it. But if that's still coming to mind, I've got one to tell.
you start with yours.
Okay.
I like the wisdom insignia on your cup, your coffee cup. I just saw it.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Uh-huh.
I like
There
that.
you go. So this is tea. You don't want to see me on coffee. Ooh. So I'm at a technology firm, and we're doing military systems development. This is we were doing high level mathematics to up level the algorithms in a radar set for the U.S. Air Force. So we've got a bird colonel who comes in from time to time to do a review. He's in. There are 10 of us on the team. He comes in and he's got his phalanx of lieutenant colonels, on each side of him. And I'm third up to make my presentation. Things have been going along pretty well now, and I'm like 2 minutes into my talk, and it's on radars. The range to the target is really important. You're going to send out a lot of energy. It goes and hits the radar. Some of it bounces back, and then we do the magic algorithm thing to tell us, is that friend or foe, and what type. So I'm 2 minutes in, and all of a sudden these words come out of his mouth. He says, we don't believe the range, don't you? Just like that. It stopped me cold in my tracks. I had no idea that was coming. I looked at that man hard, and I knew two things in that moment. One, I could not disrespect my customer and an officer in the U.S. military. And the second thing was I could not look weak in front of my team. So I just took a breath because I had no idea what I needed to do. And I looked down a bit, sometimes looking down kind of into our getting in touch with our feeling part. I took another breath, and then it came to me. I said, I've got range in my data, turned around, pointed at at what was up on the wall, and we went on. Well, the meeting, he didn't bother anybody else that day. And that was fine. We finished up, they left, and then we did our little bit of postmortem to make sure everybody knew what they had to do next. We're walking out of that conference room, Nicole, and all my teammates, who were all guys, were like slapping me on the back. Coon, you did it. That guy has been a jerk to us for years, and you did it. They were thrilled.
Brilliant.
When you show up in courage, to your earlier point,
is fabulous.
And
I love that because that decision happened in that microsecond.
yes.
When you looked down and you gathered yourself and you made a choice about what you were going to do.
That's right. And so there are two choices in there. The first choice was I was not going to be cowed by anybody. And I was not going to look weak in front of my team. So that's the first decision. And that's the one that happens in the first second. And then it's like, what do I need to do so I show up in my full power, respecting myself and others?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the difference that makes for everything. Because if you make the other person bad, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
They're going to defend, and they're going to blame.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's useless. It's pointless.
That is brilliant. Well done. Oh, what an inspiring story.
Yeah. So, developing that skill is a big part of my practice in women's leadership. Those are the kind of the foundational things for me, because strategy can happen when you can stand up to a challenge. And think about that guy.
That's it.
I have no idea if he had higher degrees in mathematics. Even
Yeah.
if he did, could he dive in deeply to
Yeah.
the stuff that 10 people had been doing for months?
Yeah.
No.
Absolutely.
His
No.
proxy
Absolutely.
for seeing if we were doing good work is to test, can I stand up and defend my work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, that's a really inspiring story, and such a remarkably important skill for women to develop is how to respond in the face of challenge.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. I love
And the
that.
higher we go up in an organization, the more there will be that challenge, because the kinds of decisions that you make, you can't go down to those level of detail that you can at lower levels.
That's exactly right. And the other one that I think is so important for women is the courage to, if you've got a really good idea and you've got a burning passion to bring something to your environment and you think it would really add value, don't sit around and wait to be asked.
Don't.
Get up there and lobby for your idea to be considered.
Yes.
And just listening to your story, I've got an example of my own, which is military related, so it popped it for me too.
Great.
So I had been working for a long time in consulting to organisations around gender equity and diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the issues that, when you think about the continuum of gender equity, at the really pointy end, we experience violence against women.
Oh, yeah.
Or quite serious, abuses of power.
Right.
And I was doing quite a bit of work in that space. And I worked with the National Rugby League here in Australia and on a consulting piece around educating the sport around reducing violence against women, because there were some incidents of it.
Okay.
And on the back of that consulting, there was a series of incidents that came out in the Australian press about incidents that were happening in the Australian Defence Force. And this was causing national scandal.
Wow.
The Defence Force was coming into serious disrepute around incidents of violence against women within the Defence Force Academy, and it was blowing up Now, I was sitting in my home and I was watching this emerging on national television, and I knew that the work that I'd been doing, and I'd been working with other collaborators, with other women that worked in universities and people who were subject matter experts around education programs. And I knew that I could offer something to that system that would help them address a really massive systemic challenge. And I had met a few years prior, I'd met the Chief of the Australian Army in a working group that I'd been involved in.
Very good.
I found the courage one day to pick up the phone and to call this guy. And I left a message for him saying, listen, I'm watching what's happening unfold for you in the press, and you've got a really big problem on your hands. And I feel deeply for you because I know how passionate you are about this issue and about making sure that the Defence Force is not an environment where women are subjected to violence. And I believe I can really help you. And this guy returned my call. And I never expected that he would return my call, but I then was able, from the courage it took for me to stand up and say, listen, this is really important and I can help you, and really stand firm in my capacity to make that difference. Yes. I was able to bring a consortium of consultants together, and we were able to deliver a solution, an education program that was rolled out through the Defence Force.
Very good. Very
so
good.
if I'd sat back and bought any of those stories about, oh no, that's too big a call, I couldn't do anything like that. But I really believed I had something to offer, and I knew other people that did. And I feel it's one of the pieces of work that I feel most proud of, and so do the other women that I work with. So, the courage to back yourself is a really critical component, isn't it?
Yes, and good for you for doing that, because think of all the women whose lives are better because you made that call.
Because yes, exactly.
Think of all the men who were tempted to do the wrong thing because the culture reinforced that,
Yeah.
but didn't
Yeah.
bring that dishonor upon themselves, didn't harm those other women. As when any one person is harmed, the perpetrator of the harm is their humanity is reduced.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
good for you. I love that. I love
Thank
that. This is fantastic. So, so that flexibility and accountability. I want
you.
to
Yeah.
come back around to that first point that you made for a really great story related to that flexibility and accountability, so that our listeners and
Yeah.
watchers really have that a sense for what that looks like and feels like when you're developing the skill to be more flexible, because we can be a little sometimes, any person can be just a little too much in their box
Yes.
and feel like they need, like that box is their safe zone, and that
Yes.
they don't want to get out of that.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
So go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
would you like me to give you a story that illustrates that? Is that what you're
I
thinking?
would love that.
Okay, fantastic. So this is something that I think I'm seeing quite frequently in the world today, because we're experiencing this concept of disruption all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Business is being disrupted, and uh, in response to that, in order to remain competitive and agile, we've got to be really flexible. And sometimes that means shifting our direction in response to what's happening in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And if I think about a company that, when I was a general manager of a business, and it was a really good, coffee is really big here in Australia. It's an incredibly huge industry here. I think we're kind of, right at the top of the chain in terms of our passion for coffee. And I was working in a coffee business. And we were experiencing, as a business, we were experiencing some real challenges in the market, because the strategy that we'd set for ourselves 12 months beforehand wasn't delivering the results that we wanted it to. And I could feel in our executive team, I could feel the pressure that everybody was experiencing around, well, we just have to work harder, and we just have to do more, and we have to lean in and nail down. But the truth was, we were bringing what I would call like a technical solution to a problem that was actually adaptive by nature, as in there was a shift in the marketplace that meant that our business was being disrupted by a competitor, and they were able to offer a service that was more cost effective and more and they were beating us to market.
Yeah.
So no matter how fast we ran, and no matter how hard we worked, we weren't taking full account of our reality.
Yeah, it was like you were running like this and they were running like big leaps.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But as an executive team, we were kind of stuck because we were really attached to our strategy. So our meetings were getting more and more and more tense.
Oh, yeah.
You could feel, that we were beginning to feel the pressure that we were under.
And fraying a little around the edges.
We were fraying a little bit. And, I could feel this I could feel this in myself. And the more that I looked down sort of the pathway that we had set for ourselves, the more I was beginning to feel like, I don't know if this is going to be the solution that's going to give us the results we need.
Yeah.
And I feel like we need to have maybe a different conversation. And so I went into an executive meeting, and I started by raising some questions, because one of the things that I realized that we needed to do was, in order for us to think differently, we sort of had to come to a shared understanding of where we were at.
Yes.
building that kind of readiness in that group is one thing before before people can get on the same page.
Yes, it's like planting seeds. You have to till the soil first.
That's right. That's right. So I started by raising some questions and gently, and I noticed the pushback that I got. I noticed that, you know, some of the people at our executive level were, you know, they were really attached.
Yes.
And that it felt threatening.
Uh-huh.
So I came away from that first meeting and I decided I needed to do some one-on-one work with my peers. I needed to have those conversations in a safer environment.
Yes.
I needed to surface the uncertainty in a way that wasn't going to feel threatening.
Yes.
I started by doing that, you know, and I realized that if I could do that ever so gently and in a way that people didn't feel like they were being threatened or attacked,
right.
that maybe the next ET meeting that we came back to, we might have a bit more space to have a different kind of conversation.
Brilliant.
So we were able to do that, and in time, it didn't happen. You know, this happened over a period of time. But in time, we were able to actually accept that we needed to adapt.
Right.
That we needed to accept that what we were doing might not get us the results, and we needed to change strategy.
Right.
And that is something that I see quite regularly. You know, and it's challenging too, because if we don't know what we need to do,
right,
we hang on to what we know how to do.
Right.
Even if it's not working.
Even if it's not working, because it's better than no action at all.
That's right.
And we can get over-wedded to it when it hasn't earned our loyalty.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And sometimes to be able to find the new solution, we've actually got to grow a little, and we've got to actually accept that we might have to change values or attitudes or beliefs in order to find the new pathway forward.
And changing things like values and beliefs are hard for people. Those things are deeply wired in our brains, and to get you know, that's a whole kind of social and individual process in and of itself to get people to a new place. You know, here in the U.S. we have this, you know, this very fractious politics that we've had for a few years, and you know, people on each side don't understand why the people on the other side you know, have the views that they have. Well, it has to do with their values and beliefs. And when you have something that you hold deeply and believe, whether it's right or wrong, you know, information that doesn't fit in that mental model that you have, it doesn't make it inside. It'll kind of like it bounces off your forehead. It never makes it in.
Yes, absolutely.
Tilling the soil is so important, and hearing what their concerns are.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Indeed. And, you know, politics is just where we see these kinds of problems, like in the overall culture. I love to observe politics because, you know, pieces of what goes on in the overall culture show up. It's kind of a useful metaphor for the kinds of human interactions that we have in our companies.
Isn't it just? And you know, one of the things that I think we notice, and we certainly see it playing out politically, and I think it's linked back to the pace of life and the pace of change, is that our capacity to sit with complexity is not so great. So we do grab at these reactive solutions.
Right.
Quite quickly, and we polarize really quickly.
We do. That part of the brain that does that is like, it fires the fastest.
That's exactly right. And so, you know, one of the things that a skill that I feel like we all need to develop more of is to notice when we can feel ourselves polarizing and getting stuck in a view, sort of really hardening.
Yeah.
Because when we go into that space, when we feel that happen for us, the truth is we're going to stop listening. We're going to stop being open. We're going to stop engaging, and we're going to deepen the potential for conflict.
Right. We're going to defend our point of view.
We're going to defend. Exactly.
There's a brilliant woman here in the U.S., Dr. Robin DiAngelo, as she does uh, a talk that she gave, talked about how not useful the good bad paradigm is.
Yeah.
She calls it the good bad binary. You know, if you're going to say something that intimates that somebody who has a different point of view is bad, you know, you've put them in a position where they have to defend. And then, you know, creativity is gone. The capacity to consider other options is gone because they are defending the fort of themselves, their integrity. Yeah. So, staying away from that. And that's a big part of the work that I do, because if you presume the best in people, then they have the opportunity to get there. Now, if they don't get there, you know their character.
Yeah.
Right. And if they do get there, which is like 80% of people, you know, then you've got somebody who is an ally for you, who gets that you are a force of nature, and that you are somebody that they are pleased to introduce and to see do well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's worth having.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what do you have as something that is really, you know, a lot of our listeners are just really, they're overstressed and short on time. They've got, you know, work and commute and family and social and all kinds of demands on their time. What do you have that might be, you know, something that is just one thing that people could add in or do in their day instead of something that isn't working so well for them, to kind of lessen the stress and open up to, you know, a better view of the world around them?
Well, I guess one of the tools that I use and that I find incredibly helpful is I have a little kind of ritual of checking in with myself at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. So when as I'm going to work and I'm thinking about what I have to accomplish in the day ahead, and I'm thinking, you know, and oftentimes even thinking about that stuff gets your brain going, you know, into that space.
We've all had that.
That's right. So I take a little moment to just check in with myself, and I say, okay, how am I tracking? You know, what are my resource levels like today? Did I get, you know, am I well rested? Am I, you know, what mindset am I bringing with me today? And the first thing I think is most important is to be honest about actually where you are, because let's face it, some days we have better days than others. And sometimes you actually need to accommodate the truth of where you are. So if you're on a lower resource day, be mindful about what that is, and if possible, plan around that.
Yeah.
So one of the things I see with so many women at work is this enormous pressure that we put on ourselves to be this notion of who we think we should be.
Yes, wearing the mask, so to speak.
That's right. And we don't do our best work from that place.
Right.
And we push too hard, and, you know, and we're actually, our bandwidth is less. So I do this little process of checking in, and then I do the same thing at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, as I'm coming home, I give myself a bit of a rating for how I felt like I self-managed and how I showed up in that day. So, you know, I might say, okay, well, here's the stuff I really showed up for well, and I think I delivered really well. Here are the things that I think I could have done better. And that's okay. And and then what I feel like I can do is I can park my day. And so I can go into my evening and into my, you know, my family time.
Yeah.
Without all of that baggage playing out.
Because you've got it outside of you. You know, you can speak it into the phone as a little recording or a note, or jot it down on paper, whatever your modality is. Getting it outside of you is golden.
Exactly. So I'm not carrying it all with me into the evening and then into the next day, and then
Yes. Oh, that is brilliant, and something that you can do while you're driving home, or
Yep. Yep.
which you're going to do anyway.
Yes, exactly. And you know how you talk about getting it out of you. I love that because, like you, I've got a great passion for science, and all of the neuroscience tells us that when we speak that out loud or we write it down,
Uh-huh.
we actually move that blood flow from, the limbic system up into the executive cortex, where we can regulate our emotions so much better.
Yes.
So actually, it has an instantaneous grounding
Yes,
effect.
it does. It does.
Yeah.
And yeah, but that is brilliant and so simple
Mm,
to do.
mm,
So
mm,
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Well,
mm.
where can people get a hold of you if they are
Um, Absolutely. So Executive Central is the business that I work with, and you can find us on. We have a website, and you can find us there, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Nicole Hercus.
very good? And I'll put that in the show notes. And Nicole, this has just been extraordinary. You are a gift to all of our listeners and viewers, and I can't say enough about how much fun I had with you today. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dorothy. Such a pleasure. I really
Oh,
appreciate it.
you bet. Bye for now.
Bye.